Dr. Nick Towle, who is a clinical lecturer in acute care and global health at the University of Tasmania, an active contributor to the University of Tasmania Education for Sustainability Community of Practice. His early endeavours in education for sustainability began in the sphere of community engagement as a leader of initiatives such as Cycle for Sustainability. He's passionate about bridging the gap between theoretical perspectives in higher education, governance and societal action for sustainability, with ongoing contributions in permaculture design and education. He's also advisor to the state government through the Tasmanian Climate Action Council and a pursuer of innovative models of community enterprise. Quite an interesting character is Nick Towle. Please welcome him to the stage.
Okay, so introductions can be an interesting thing. So a few years ago I was staying with some friends here in Hobart, and I was explaining my role as an academic with the university and the enjoyment I gained from that. And the next day I was introduced by their 4-year-old daughter, and she said, "This is my friend Nick, and he's an activist for the universe." So, simultaneously a wonderful honour, but also a powerful reminder of the responsibility that we carry for the well-being of future generations. So I'm going to really offer in a moment some reflections and provocations from my perspective in Generation X, so really bring it down to an individual level. I'd like to open with a brief health analogy. So I'd like you to come with me at this point. Imagine yourself entering a family meeting to discuss the health of a loved one. So thank you for coming, and please ensure you're comfortably seated. Look, I'm sorry to say this, but the news I have to share is very difficult. Your mother is very ill. Now, she came in with what seemed like a simple fever, but the fever is actually causing her to be a bit delirious, acting in less predictable ways now. So in running some investigations, we've actually identified that her health is much worse than we originally anticipated, and it's probably been declining over some time. You may have noticed it yourself, perhaps a bit more sluggish than usual, not quite as radiant as before. What's causing this? Well, there's an organism that's been spreading across the continents. Cars. But the cars appear to have captured another set of complex organisms. People, humans. Now, from what we can ascertain, there's a kind of symbiotic relationship going on here. The cars drive the humans to do such harmful things. We need to deploy some social scientists to fully understand that complex arrangement. Now, why haven't the human organisms broken free of their car captors? Now, they seem to also be bound in their ways by a form of religion that's spreading a bit across the continents. An invisible deity, the invisible hand of the market, as some might suggest. Now, so far we've applied a course of treatment. Look, it's too early to tell if this is really having the benefit that we'd hoped. So what to do about it? There are some choices to make on your part. Now, we recommend involving palliative care. Now, that doesn't mean that your mother is going to die. What's important to understand is that there are some irreversible aspects to this illness, and palliative care specialists are the experts in treating symptoms and minimising suffering. There are clearly some reversible aspects to this illness, and it's certainly good that we choose to focus our efforts there, ideally to maintain as good a health as possible and prevent further deterioration. What's the prognosis? Well, we know that if we ignore these worrying symptoms, that things won't improve by themselves. Now, I know it's a lot of information to take in right now, so I just suggest going away and reflecting on the situation. Perhaps jot down some questions you might have. I can offer you some more information to discuss with family and friends. And with your consent, I'll gather a multidisciplinary team of professionals in sustainability for our next meeting. So as a Generation X father, that's the kind of honest conversation that I'll need to have with my child when he's old enough to understand. We need to get good at breaking bad news, but in a way that does not take away hope, does not take away possibility for the future. So as we grapple with the conditions of uncertainty and complexity, we've come to understand that there are certain boundaries, planetary boundaries or limits that we mustn't cross. So here's the first idea I asked you to consider. Sustainability is a race. There's an urgency to act to prevent consequences that we cannot adapt to. It's a long race, so the journey does matter as much as the destination. Though unlike the typical race, there are no winners in the race to sustainability until the last person, the last institution, crosses the line. So as we celebrate our respective contributions through awards such as Green Gowns, let's give a thought to strengthening the institutional award or adding another category. Let's hold in great esteem the organisation that mobilises some of its resources to advance the achievement of others. So collectively we need to flood the entries for Best Newcomer Award and make that happen. So I'm advocating a kind of radical cooperation. Now the word processor wanted to correct that to radical cooperation, but no, radical cooperation. Now I know that notion, and particularly at senior management levels, as alluded to, creates a sense of unease. It's a way of operating that we're conditioned to resist. But I should reiterate, there are no winners in the race to sustainability until every person, every institution crosses that line. So from a Generation X perspective, I've got a couple of provocations or divides to bridge. So within the context of my life, Generation X, so I was born a couple of years after the release of the Limits to Growth, just to give context. So the ideas I share are partly drawn from contemporary literature, but also tested with a few cohorts of my students. At our campus, we have a regular ride to work breakfast, a free breakfast for those who choose to ride. And so that gives me the unique opportunity for many hours in thought-provoking conversation and reflection with our students. So those in Generation X and younger have grown up firmly embedded in the debt-based growth model economy. That's all we know. We're so deeply enmeshed in the current market economy, we don't even realise the inherent unsustainability and that there might even be some alternatives to what currently exists and the way the society operates. Now, this process has been insidious. I'll offer a couple of examples. And this is particularly for Tasmanian and Australian audiences. What sign used to be in the place of this one? And the transition, I can't remember exactly when, but sometime in the last 10 years. What's the message? What's the message? We've become so saturated by the message of consumption, we no longer notice them. We're encouraged to have a sort of unwavering faith in the market. And this seamless transition from pedestrian or citizen to consumer is reflected in many examples. So I'll pick up now to higher education. So consider one of those places where you voluntarily spend many minutes of your time, a GP waiting room or a clinic waiting room. I asked some of my students to carefully document the health messages that were present within a GP waiting room. So this is actually our ED waiting room, slightly different. But they came back to me with the usual. Get your man check, get your immunisations, quit smoking, so on. I probed them further, said, and there's more. And so they came back to me again and said, well, there's a television in the corner and there's some commercials running and so on. But it was only when I asked them to observe the behaviour of patients sitting in those waiting rooms that they actually identified the most prominent source of health messages. And you probably appreciate this. The pile of magazines in the GP waiting room are plastered with health messages. Dieting is the path to happiness. A luxury holiday will fix everything. You can eat this amazing chocolate cake and still lose weight. And then we hit with all those unachievable, photoshopped body images. So you go in with a sore throat and you come out with a body image disorder. So it's inspiring to see within the program a lot of focus on the campus experience, how to embed sustainability learning into the lived experience of staff and students. But we need to recognise that for many disciplines, the places of work-based experience are also the places where they take on and absorb those cultural cues and those messages. Can we have an influence in those spaces as well? So the next phenomenon I'd like to share is that of ecological amnesia. So the generation that remembers what this river was once like before the mining boom is gone. We're an entire generation or more that simply do not appreciate the quality that has been lost. Many of you will have sufficient ecological literacy to recognise the fragile ecological situation presented here. But there are generations now who simply do not appreciate what landscape or ecology existed before this, believing that this is biodiversity at its best, and not recognising they're probably observing a stage of decline. So similarly with climate change, we talk about a stable climate, but accept that those born today will have trouble grappling with the concept of stable climate. Killer heat waves, uncontrollable bushfires will become a more normal aspect to their lived experience. So where I'm getting to is it is actually much harder to get someone excited about something they have never experienced, never lived. So it's a generational thing coming to us. So the scientists among us are not the ones necessarily to bridge that divide. It will take a collaboration of scientists as well as the arts and humanities as well to try and capture the essence of what's been and what we might need to restore. Now, a hallmark of the 21st century, I'm moving on, is a flood of information through more channels than ever before. So combined with this sort of collective fading of our ecological memory, we're presented with the challenge of information literacy or the lack of information literacy. So our capacity to critique the unsustainable society that we're part of is in part tied to our capacity to judge and to assimilate good quality information. Now I acknowledge that this is not the only way of knowing, but it's significant. Curiosity, I recently completed a MOOC, a massive open online course, which was an introduction to sustainability. And I gained from that the lack of information literacy was really evident, even among fellow participants who had higher education qualifications. So I took a few lessons from it though, and one of those is my feeling. You cannot mass teach sustainability. Learning is a profoundly social experience. It needs to be embedded in a context and not distracted from that. And so the learning happens best within a framework and a tangible experience where learners can see how sustainability principles manifest. So for me at our campus, we took initiative to replace many of the ornamental trees and shrubs with fruiting trees, berry bushes, herbs and so on. And so this is the starting point for our conversations around food security, around social determinants of health and other facets of sustainability. It creates a meaningful context for those conversations. So it's fascinating, and obviously in the introduction we received from the university, the emergence of open education resources and new platforms of education offerings. Could these be positive disruptive technologies? So optimistically, I would say that the institution that engages sustainability, that is a strategy for actually maintaining relevance. We talk about resilience, but in some regards, engaging in sustainability is about maintaining relevance as we go ahead into the 21st century. Now, having said that sort of learning needs a context, I wonder about the possibility of co-creating a multi-institutional MOOC or some vehicle that actually reconnects learners to their place, to their home institutions. So again, that vision of sort of radical cooperation. I'll move on to leadership. I'm thinking about that now. Imagine Gandhi in the 21st century. Join me. 24 days of non-violent direct action, Salt March to Dandi. In the social media era, do potential leaders fail to gain visibility or are simply so transient as to not make a difference? Leadership will, in essence, probably look different and feel different to maybe what it has in the past. So maybe Facebook and other social media platforms aren't necessarily the enablers for leadership, but there's an interesting dimension there to it. So my experience of social media within a small community is that my students will often know what I've been up to on the weekend if I've been out with family members. So we're now faced with the prospect that institutional leadership extends into the personal lives of institutional staff. So our personal authenticity in the way that we choose to live our lives is now part of the message and the cultural learning that our students take on. Conversely, think about social media. Senior management will need to accept and respond to a greater level of scrutiny than before. So consider this spotlight on my own institution. How does a higher education institution that is genuinely committed to sustainability respond to this? Do we embrace transparency and all the rich learning opportunities that could come from that and stem from that? Or do we adopt some sort of market-driven, the deity, greenwashing exercise in response? It's a good learning opportunity. So finally, this brings me to consider the rating of institutions. It's been alluded to before. So of course there are many metrics, Life Sustainability Index, Planet Green League and so on. Here I take you back to the opening analogy. So from a climate and change health perspective, consider Institution X that will graduate 120 doctors this year. Also graduates several geologists, and 2 of them go on to be petroleum geologists. What's the net contribution that that institution has made to sustainability? Now, it's tempting to think that the net contribution is 0, but it's not quite the case. At present, our doctors and soon-to-be medical graduates are working flat out to put the petroleum geologists out of a job. But could it be different? Could it be better? Could our institution work so that we're not fostering that sort of tension and conflict upon graduation? Look, I think it's a big ask for Generation X academics and professional staff to challenge the direction of institutions. We know it's a big task, and particularly those institutions that are striving to align their course offerings to the push and pull of the market economy. But it's necessary. So in closing, I guess I've offered a few additional dimensions to our sustainability challenge. Entire generations that are so deeply embedded in that sort of debt-based growth model economy that perhaps don't, appreciate the unsustainability of it. Ecological amnesia, potentially a lack of information literacy. There are some innovations that provide opportunities for collaboration, cooperation, and also greater scrutiny of our leadership and our institutions. So within this context, and very much aligned to the focus of this conference, we do need to keep striving for that deep alignment. Starting with transparent and accountable decision making within senior management. The campus experiences that embody sustainability learning. The courage to challenge market orthodoxy by placing cooperation above competition. And a vision to positively influence the culture of the communities beyond the boundaries of our physical campuses and our digital spaces. So I know, like myself, you are committed to the well-being of present and future generations. So I just want to thank you for your dedication and thank you for being here.